we have Scott Pownell. So Scott is a scientist, a biohacker, and an entrepreneur who's passionate about breaking down the barriers people face when trying to engage with DNA. So his question to you is, what would you do if you had access to a biolab? Scott, please come on stage.
So this is the first time I've spoken to a big group like this. So, okay, well, yes, I posed the question, what would you do if you had access to a biolab? I'm one of, is that better? I'm one of the founders of Open Science Network, Vancouver's community biolab. Can we have a next slide? What is science? I like this definition from NASA. Science is more like a mystery, inviting anybody who is interested to become a detective and join in the fun. Next slide. So back in 2013, I'd never heard of the DIY bio movement. My entire career was in academia and industry, and things had changed in my life, and I was starting to collect laboratory equipment with the idea of doing some background garage type bio. And then I discovered DIY bio, and I was completely enthralled by it, so I started to explore it. And the DIY bio community started in 2008, and they're really the foundation of a lot of these community labs opening up around the world. So a year ago in February, we got together at the old Maker Labs, which used to be just around the block here on Kingsway and 10th. And we had a big meeting. We had about 40, 50 people turn up from both the DIY Bio Vancouver meetup group and from the Innovations Lab group. And we posed the question, is it time for Vancouver to have a community biolab? So following on from that discussion, you know, we showed all these groups around the world that were there. Up in the top right corner is Biospace, which is British Columbia's first community biolab, and that's set up by my friend Derek Jacoby in Victoria. So if any of you hail from Victoria, you may want to explore that. But there are other ones in Singapore, France, Berlin. The big one in North America, or the big two in North America, is BioCurious. It was one of the first community biolabs, and then also GenSpace in New York City. BioCurious is in San Francisco. And more recently, Counterculture Labs started up in Oakland as an offshoot from BioCurious, but they've been opening up all over the place. Next slide. So from that meeting, we gathered a great bunch of people, citizen scientists, to go through the process of creating Open Science Network, Vancouver's first community biolab. We became incorporated as a nonprofit society here in BC in June of last year. And we're basically a community of citizen scientists, students, artists, makers, engineers, writers, tinkerers, biohackers, and professional scientists. Basically, anybody that has an interest in science can come and engage with us. Next slide. So this is the core group that helped to found Open Science Network. But first, down in the bottom right corner, Michael Yamashita actually founded the DIY Bio Vancouver meetup group. That was back in 2010. And there have been various attempts over this time to try to create a community biolab, but it never really took off. And so it was that meeting last February where we launched, and it was this group of people that worked hard to incorporate and set up the community biolab. And I'm just going to introduce, a few of them are here in this talk. There's Eric Zepka. He's actually been working with the DIY Bio group for quite some time, and it was he and I that kind of set up that talk last year. And he's a new media artist, quite a good one. Ian Johnson, he is a marine engineer, but he had a previous life as a biochemist. There's Casey Wong, who's a fabulous fabulous designer, and does great graphics too. Emily Fan, she's a neuroscientist at SFU. Wes Wong, he has been very interested in engaging in community activities. He has a background in biochemistry, and then me in the center. Next slide. So what do? We gather to share ideas, knowledge, equipment, opinions in a friendly and collaborative atmosphere. So these are some of the photos that we've taken of the various events that we've had. Next slide. So how many people here have seen their own DNA? Can you raise your hand? Okay, a few people. Well, you should come to our Open Lab Wednesdays, and it only takes a couple minutes and you'll be able to see your own DNA. So we had an event last year at the Mini Maker Fair, and we were doing just that, showing people how their own DNA. Next slide. So some of the things that we do, we run workshops. Some of the workshops have been DNA fingerprinting. So this is what the people at the crime scene investigators do when they collect DNA samples from a crime scene. We look at just one marker. They'll look at like 20 just to make sure it's really you. We teach about working with DNA, cutting DNA with restriction enzymes. We teach about aseptic techniques, working with lab strains of bacteria. We're just starting up to teach people how to do DNA cloning, to be able to take DNA from one place and put it into bacteria, and just the general mechanics of that. And we've got more workshops planned. Next, please. We also run journal clubs to engage people with topical areas of research. So some of the topics have been on the CRISPR technology, which has been in the news. How many people have heard of CRISPR? Okay, good. So we generally run it about once a month. Next slide. We also have guest speakers. So just this last Wednesday at our Open Lab Wednesday, we had Willoughby Aravello, who's from Radical Mycology. He came and gave a demo workshop on how to work with fungi, how to grow it at home, how to propagate it for medicinal and for eating. He's an awesome cook and a great speaker. It was a very dynamic event, and I think everybody had a lot of fun. Next slide. A while back, Carl Pruz from the BC Cancer, the Prostate Center, came and gave a fabulous talk on genomics and personalized medicine. It was probably one of the best turnouts that we've had of all of our events. Next slide. And just recently, Luke Maloney from the Pandora Benevolent Society, who's probably a lot of people know him from his tea ceremonies that he gives at the winter solstice and during other events. And so he has this fascinating collection of teas, and I didn't know it before. You know, I'm a tea bag kind of a guy, I guess, but the good teas actually have a lot of fungi growing on them, and that's a good thing. It gives them the flavor, we basically stuck those under the microscope, and so it was a great time drinking this fabulous tea and looking at the cool microscopes. And Luke's up here in the front of the audience. Next slide. So we also do projects, and so this is a way to try to engage people, and we're open to ideas. So if people have an idea that they want to come to us, certainly talk to us. But some of the projects that we're working on, we've got a really good core group of people, Emily Fan and Raphael Hufner and Evan, starting up bioprinting. And so they've been able to do some proof of concept, this image on the left here, where they're able to produce materials within a biogel. We also have people interested in biosensors, so trying to develop electronic hardware to be able to sense the environment. And of course, people interested in synthetic biology and cloning. Recently, we've had a fellow who sells a kombucha tea, and he's fascinated. He and one of our directors, Casey, they're both fascinated about kombucha and where it came from. So it seems to be all around the world, and nobody really knows where it comes from. And so we're starting a DNA barcoding approach to try to analyze the different microorganisms that are in kombucha. You know, kombucha scobies have fungus as well as bacterial components. So we're trying to compare the different scobies from around the world. And also fermentation. Who likes fermentation? We're in a bar. Okay, next slide. Another thing that we're doing is outreach. Wes Wong is spearheading our STEM mentoring cafe. So on May 2nd, we're going to be at UBC. The Faculty of Pharmaceutical Science has kindly offered space and support to put on this STEM mentoring cafe. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's to bring young students in grades 5 to 8 and link them up with mentors in areas that they might be interested in. So it's the first time we've tried this, so it'll be interesting. Next slide. Okay, so we've got a few big projects that we're thinking about, and one of them is sequencing a novel genome. And to my knowledge, there's been no community biolab that's actually done something as significant as this. We'd be looking at a small genome, maybe a microbe or a fungi, something that's not too expensive to do. The cost of genome sequencing has plummeted, and we would have to do a crowdfunding campaign to try to raise the funds for that. And of course, if there's anybody that's interested in supporting that or engaging with that, let us know. Next slide. Another one that we're quite excited about is to run a Vancouver synthetic biology hackathon. And the idea here is that we would have a hackathon day where people would come together and compete to come up with a project, and that project would then be funded and the people would have access to the community biolab to be able to fulfill that. You know, science takes a bit of time, so it's not like the hackathons in the computer area where you can come in and code something in a day. Biology just takes time to grow and whatever. Next slide. So the question is, what would you do if you had access to a biolab? Next slide. So thank you. So we are on Meetup. That's where we post all of our events. And so if you check us out, you know, our website is opensciencenet.com, and that will get you to all of our links for Facebook as well as Meetup. But yeah, our Open Lab Wednesday, they typically run from 6 to 9 on Wednesdays, and we are located in the new Maker Labs, which is in Strathcona on Cordova at Hawkes. So we've got a small lab there, and we'd love to show you the lab. Okay, thank you.